if you could have better sold your story as to why you want to be a physician, they may have loved to talk to you because you're a very different type of applicant. What's up, guys? We are here for episode 6, our last episode in our first batch. We'll call it our first season of application renovation. If you are looking for application help, look no further than Next Step Test Prep. They are the sponsor of today's episode. I have personally screened all of their advisors as their curriculum director to make sure that they have the knowledge and the skills to provide you the best information possible when it comes to providing feedback on your essays, providing feedback during mock interviews, and much more. Let's go ahead and jump into our final episode here in our first season of application renovation, diving into another application of an applicant who did not get into medical school this time. And we'll call him John for today. How you doing, John?
I'm doing all right.
Awesome. Let me talk to you about your application process. Why do you think you haven't gotten any interviews? I think you said you haven't gotten any interviews to this point, right?
Yep, that's right.
So that's a telling thing in of itself. So why do you think you haven't gotten any interviews to this point?
So on my primary application at that time, I didn't have any research in my pocket at all. So that was something that I think was missing. On some secondaries, I was able to add that as I did this in the fall semester. I was doing research. So I think that was one glaring thing. But other than that, I was concerned maybe my MCAT score was too low, or I honestly don't know.
Okay. So I will tell you that most likely the lack of research had nothing to do with not getting any interviews. Unless you only applied, I haven't looked at your school list yet, unless you only applied to like top research institutions in the country, it probably was not a huge factor in not getting an interview.
Okay.
All right, so let's just dive into your application and take a look. So just looking at it right away, you applied on the second day it was available, right, on 6/1. Usually that's right around the first day. Last year, 2018, it opened on May 31st. So you applied the first day. It amazes me. Still took almost a month to get that verified, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. Looking through, nothing big in anything there. So one of the things you blocked out, this is something that I think that's good for students to know. You blocked out your parents' occupations, but based on what you put in for occupations and the highest level of schooling, AMCAS will automatically calculate the SES disadvantage, and that's socioeconomic status.
Okay.
And so obviously based on maybe your parents' jobs, their education levels, they have bachelor's degrees, so that's okay, but maybe based on their jobs, it marked it as disadvantaged. So just something good for students to know. You have your brother, and again, no huge red flags with misdemeanors or felonies or anything like that, so that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into grades. So you have a lot of high school grades on here from dual enrollment, which is good. Jumping into freshman year at University of Minnesota, some A's. You got a C in music history. Apparently, you're not a music fan.
I am just the history.
You are. It's all music on here. You're just not a music history fan.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay. Freshman, sophomore, again, A's, B's. So decent grades throughout junior years. So you were a music major, obviously.
Yeah.
All music stuff. So no science credits that I can see here at all. And then jumping from 2012, 2013, you're in graduate school.
Yep.
And then 2016, you start your postbac work. So at some point in there, the switch was made to go, no more music. I want to learn about medicine. Hopefully
Yep.
you'll enjoy the history of medicine a little bit more than you've enjoyed the history of music. But we'll see
I've
about that.
yeah, I've matured a little bit, so
That's good. What do I have to learn from old people? They don't know anything. um, so you're postbac working there. Lots of different schools that you have on your school list. That's crazy. And then looking at your GPA. So you have a really good GPA. Obviously 4.0 from your high school dual enrollment courses, your postbac work at a 4.0, 27 credits. So not a ton of credits at this point. I'm assuming that when you applied, you probably weren't done with all of your prereqs.
right.
Okay. And that's okay. You can do that. You can apply. And obviously this is weird where you have 0, 0, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior science credits, but that's okay. And so GPA wise, right, your grades are great. 4.0 postbac, 3.87 cumulative undergrad. So strong grades. Your first attempt at the MCAT was a 500. Your second attempt, a 509. So great score increase. What did you do to increase your score that much?
Honestly, I think it was just it was a location thing. So the first time I took it about 100 miles away from where I live, so I had to stay in a hotel. Obviously, I didn't get a great night's sleep before in a hotel. Whereas the second time I took it in Minneapolis here.
And was that because when you registered for the exam, there just weren't any exam dates near you?
Yep, the closest two were Eau Claire and Duluth, Minnesota, and both are about the same distance away.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important. As soon as you think you know the time frame of when you want to take the test, go and register for that date because the seats are limited. So
Yeah.
good learning experience there. So great score increase. And based on your application, and depending on when you were able to submit your secondaries, your application wasn't fully complete at the medical schools until that second score came back at the beginning of August.
Right.
So still pretty early in the application cycle. You got your 509, you got your 4.0. Why didn't you get an interview? That's the question. All right.
Right.
Where it's like a big giant game of trying to figure this out. All right. So let's look at and again, I've harped on this in previous episodes of Application Renovation. I'll continue to harp on it until I die. The application process, getting into medical school, is so much more than MCAT and GPA. And so you could have likely gone on to the Facebook group or the Student Doctor Network or to Reddit or anywhere and said, I have a 4.0 science GPA and a 509 MCAT score, and I haven't got any interviews. And then all the little freshmen are like, uh-oh, I guess I need a 4.2 GPA and a 519 MCAT score to get interviews. And it's just not true. There's just something else in your application that's missing, which is why we're doing this. Okay. So let's look. The first thing you have on here is medical and clinical experience. Simulation center helper and volunteer patient. And so let's look what you did here. You helped set up, run, and tear down simulations for training and hospital staff. By acting as patient family members, I was able to help new staff members learn proper bedside manner, address concerns in their training and future experiences. Is that clinical experience?
I guess I'd call it clinical because it was in a hospital, but I don't think it's necessarily direct patient contact.
Yeah. It's not direct patient contact. And so for me, that's a check off of not medical or clinical. And it's confusing because they really don't have really good classifications for what this may be. And so I would still call it not medical, clinical. It's obviously great experience. You're learning and you're helping and all this other stuff. And yes, it's in a clinical setting, but it's not patient care.
Okay.
So right off the bat, I'd be like, are you trying to pull one over on me? You trying to claim this as clinical experience? Are you? And so I would probably look even closer at the rest of your experiences because I think maybe you're trying to pull one over on me.
Okay.
So you got to be careful with that. But great experience. So I would keep doing it, but just reclassify it. And then we have next here, we have 500 hours of experience that started. Where's the other one? The other one started. Okay, so the other thing here is this experience didn't start until May of 2018, so just a month before you submitted your application. So not super impactful as far as, oh, look at that, the time he's been doing it. Okay. And then the other one you have on here, clinical experience, started in March of 2018.
Yep.
So only 3 months before you submitted. And so to me, reading this, and we've talked about this on the last application renovation, is you don't want to make it look like you're cramming everything in at the last minute to go, oh, shoot, I need to have clinical experience. Let me go run out and get it.
Right.
Okay? And that's what it looks like just from a date perspective.
Okay.
Okay, so that can be kind of a red flag. 500 hours is, I'm assuming that was an estimate of where you started, including your end date before medical school.
Right.
Okay, which you can do. I'm not a fan of doing it because I think it's kind of a little bit of a white lie. It's allowed, but I'm not a fan of it. So if you have to apply again, obviously you're going to have more hours, potentially maybe only put those hours. Although it's one of those like performance enhancing drug things. Like if everybody's using performance enhancing drugs, why can't I too? If everybody's padding their hours a little bit, why can't I too? And so I wish that the application services would not allow padding those hours. You can put the date range out to that spot just to paint a picture of what you're going to be doing, but don't estimate the hours out that far as well.
Okay.
That's just my perspective. And so you have this thing that you've done for 3 months, and you're claiming it's a most meaningful experience. And so I'm like, well, is it really? It's only for 3 months. Is it really most meaningful? And then we look at exactly what you were doing, right? So you started volunteering in the emergency department, and you were a patient experience assistant and stabilization room recorder. Okay? I don't know what that is, but I'll keep reading and find out because you tell me. The time in here you don't need twice per week for 4 hours per day. I don't need to know that information. That's just wasted space.
Okay.
You have that you would clean their rooms, you would assist patients and their families to their rooms, and you would make them comfortable while they were there, bringing them food and blankets. I would try as much as possible to not point out a lot of things that may be seen as lesser experiences from a medical or clinical perspective.
Okay.
I wouldn't call them out to say, I cleaned rooms, right? Because that's great. So you were kind of a janitor person, right?
Right.
So I wouldn't call that out to say, look at all this experience I have of not medical, not clinical.
Okay.
Right? So I think you have probably plenty of experiences interacting with those patients, getting good clinical experience that you could focus on, and then just kind of remove the focus on the non-clinical stuff.
Okay.
And that's where you kind of fall into a trap of writing about job descriptions if the job description is kind of going to throw you under the bus. Okay, so you got to be careful there.
Yeah.
And then you talked about freeing the nurses and doctors to focus on stabilizing the most critical of patients that entered the ED. I don't care about them. I want to know about you.
Okay.
All right. Your most meaningful essay you talked about. So just for the viewer, you get the 700 characters for the description, the the 1,325 characters for the most meaningful essay. Reading this when you started volunteering, excited about accruing volunteer hours, right? I don't know how many people come and like, I'm really excited about accruing hours, right? So it seems a little disingenuous, I think.
Right.
So just be careful about that.
Okay.
As the hours accumulated, so still focusing on those hours, you found it more difficult to leave the department once my scheduled shifts were over. So just saying that you really liked it. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to get to a point where I want to know the impact that you had on this position or the impact that the position had on you, not that you were super excited about it.
Okay.
Great. You were excited to come to work every day or come to volunteer every day. But let's talk more in depth. And for clinical experiences, for this kind of experience, telling me a story about one of the patients that you interacted with, telling me the story about one of the patients where you left the hospital that day and was like, yes, like that patient, Johnny, like that's why I want to be a physician.
Okay.
How I was able to interact with him and be there for him, that's why I want to do this. So looking at it, you basically just continued to talk about kind of experiences and why it was important to you, but not less of impact, right? I like to see that impact from a patient story would be good.
Okay.
And so for me, just like the first one where I'm like, is this really clinical? Is this really clinical? Right? You're cleaning rooms.
Right.
So I would raise another little red flag to be like, I'm going to be a little bit suspicious about these 500 hours. Not only because 500 is really probably twice per week for 4 hours per day is 8 hours a week for 3 months is whatever that is, right? 80,
Right.
almost 100 hours, right?
Yeah.
Not 500, so I would subtract a lot of hours. So in my mind right now, you're only sitting at 100 hours of clinical experience
Okay.
as of submission date.
Right.
So let's continue looking here. You have shadowing experience, 8 hours in March. Looking at the next page here, you have some more shadowing hours. I typically like to lump all the shadowing into one.
Okay.
The fact that you have this as a most meaningful is another red flag to me because for me, like just thinking about what shadowing is, I'm very skeptical when somebody has shadowing as a most meaningful experience.
Okay.
Just because I know that shadowing is super boring for students and they're just kind of hanging out and watching and trying to learn and just trying to soak it all in. And it's not interactive usually at all. And so for it to be a most meaningful, it's usually a stretch. And for only 20 hours that you're saying it's most meaningful, that's a really big stretch for me. And so for me, it's like you're trying too hard to prove that this is what you want to do by calling it a most meaningful.
Okay.
For date ranges that are so close together, stopping in February 2018 and starting again in March, I would just lump those as one date range.
Okay.
And put it under 20 hours, just in case there have been errors where schools will only pull one of those date ranges. So I would just do it all on one. All right. And then it's funny, last week I was like, isn't artistic endeavors an experience type? And yes, it is. It is there. So thank you for answering that question for me. So you have South Dakota Symphony, some time there. Not medical, clinical, obviously symphony orchestra here. You were a flight attendant for a while. So I guess musicians go on to be flight attendants.
Flight attendants for free.
There you go. You have the Royal College of Music. So let's talk about this. So this is one of those things where should this be an experience? Right? most people classify experiences as extracurricular activities.
Okay.
And it looks like potentially this is like school that you're applying to.
Yeah, went to.
Yeah. Yeah. So should school be included in your extracurricular list?
No, it's more curricular.
Yeah. I mean, it's the definition of curricular, right?
Right.
And so I don't think it's wrong. I would just, again, kind of combining it with the sketchy calling this thing clinical experience and this other thing clinical experience. Now you're trying to pad it a little bit with school, and it's cool. School is cool, right? It's cool that there's this experience that you had in London. So I don't think it's wrong. I think it just may be adding up to a point where I'm like, really? Like, you're putting school in your extracurricular list? If it was the first time, like, I questioned anything, I was like, all right, that's fine. A lot of students put this type of stuff in their study abroad things, even though maybe technically they shouldn't. I don't, it's not wrong. It's one of those things, just maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Okay.
Um, and then you have your server, hobbies, world travel, all-state band, youth symphonies. So music dominates this, right?
Yeah.
You have up to the point of submitting your application, you have roughly 100 hours up to your application submission. You have 28 hours total of shadowing.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this kind of cool simulation center thing that you squeezed in there at the last second. Okay? So
Right.
for me, looking at your application without looking at anything else, I would say the number one reason you didn't get an interview is because you lacked a lot of clinical experience to prove to the reader that you really want to be a physician.
Okay.
Okay? That's the biggest red flag for me in your application. Okay?
Alrighty.
So let's get to your personal statement, and let's
Sure.
see how you were able to show the reader why you wanted to be a physician. So you start out talking about music. Obviously, huge part of your life, what you're doing. The first part of your personal statement is more why not music
Okay.
than why
Yep.
medicine,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's why not music because basically you failed at being a musician, right? Not
True.
having won a position in the orchestra yet,
Yeah.
right? And that's okay. But with the point of the personal statement being why do you want to be a physician, and you're basically saying I really wanted to be a musician but I failed to earn a spot and I really had nothing to fall back on, so here I am. Right?
Right. Right.
Right? And that's the last kind of story that you want to try to tell.
Okay.
I think with music being such a huge part of your life, obviously it's going to be in your personal statement.
Yeah.
To talk about where life has taken you, obviously as a kind of non-traditional applicant, and
Right.
that's fine. But I wouldn't start off with this.
Okay.
Next paragraph talking about moving back to Minnesota, continuing to talk about music, and then finally saying, "Hey, my passion was lost." Right? And now you're
Yep.
getting into the soul searching.
Right.
And you started to look for other careers. So you have 2 paragraphs starting out all about why not music. After speaking with my partner of 7 years who had already earned his doctorate in psychology, you began thinking about the classes that you took, that you had an interest in while in high school and undergraduate school. And so I was like, okay, well, my partner has a doctorate in psychology. I like psychology. I'll be a psychologist, right? That's where I'm going right now.
Okay.
And so right off the bat, it's like you jump back into, I liked science. I liked research and chemistry and biology were easy and a natural
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
I guess I should be a doctor. Right?
Yeah.
So you go back to music to try to point out some aspects about what you liked, the joy and emotions it brought to those that listened. So right off the bat, I'm going to think that, well, you've already proven to me that you like science, right?
Mm-hmm.
The two most cliche things that you can talk
Right.
about in your personal statement, right? The two most cliche things that you can talk about in your personal statement. I like science and I like helping people. And it looks like you're trying to go right away with the joy and emotions it brought to those that listen to the performances is another cool new way to talk about how you like to help people.
Right.
Then the next one, the sense of teamwork felt, right? The joining 1 to 200 other musicians. So you're trying to sell a little bit to the reader. Look, teamwork is a huge part of being a musician, and I know medicine is big in teamwork, so I got that base covered, dude. Right? You should accept me. And so you keep going, months and weeks and months of painstaking work and collaboration. So more teamwork come together to form a cohesive whole. So basically, you're like, dude, I like science from high school. My partner's a doctor of psychology, so that's basically like I'm a psychologist already. Being a musician, I like to help people with music because they enjoy it. Music is all about teamwork, and I'm ready to work hard because that's what composing music is all about. It takes weeks and even months to do it.
Right.
So I'm ready to work hard. So you're like checking off boxes that you think the reader wants to hear to go, okay, so let me see. You like science. You like to help people. You are used to working hard. Done. Right? Accepted.
Right.
Right? So we're still missing the point of why do you want to be a doctor?
Uh-huh.
And you're trying to write, here's why I think I'm going to be a good one.
Oh.
Okay? It's a
That
big
makes sense.
difference there. You could potentially still write about a lot of these experiences,
Mm-hmm.
but focused more on why you want to be a doctor. So I wouldn't completely scrap talking about music. Again, it's a huge part of who you are. I don't
Right.
think you need the comparisons in
Okay.
there to say, look, music is XYZ and being a doctor is XYZ. Again, that trying to make those comparisons is just trying to prove why you think you're going to be a good doctor. And so you don't need to
Okay.
do that. You talk here, it was obvious to me that the natural next step in my life was to bring the healing I brought to people from the stage into the operating room. Like, how do you make that leap? That's a huge leap. Like, I love music, I want to cut people open.
Uh-huh.
Right? And it's one of those super cliche things that a lot of students will talk about. In an operating room and in a trauma room in an emergency department,
Mm-hmm.
students love to talk about how the physician orchestrated the whole team of the nurses and doctors and everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're kind of using that kind of cliche of the orchestration of the team to now I'm going to be a surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no thought process that you're laying out here for me to know why you want to be a physician. And then I would get rid of the theme, the music theme that you hear, though I needed help on how to choose the first note. Right?
Yeah.
That's just getting a little too fancy there. So you met with the counselor, laid out the requirements, re-enrolled in school to complete the science courses. You don't need that kind of step-by-step, and then I did this, and then I did this.
Okay.
Right? It's obvious that you had to do some things.
Right.
Studying for the MCAT, so that whole next paragraph is kind of all kind of next steps. You talked about your age. I don't think you need to talk about your age. Obviously, they're going to have your age as part of the application. I don't think you need to bring fears. Again, the goal is to talk about why you want to be a physician, not here are my fears about going to medical school.
Right.
And again, right, the theme that you're carrying on here. I was concerned medical school admissions committees wanted to hear the music of today, rock, pop music, rather than the early romantic symphony I was bringing to the table. It's very creative, but it's not good for the personal statement.
Okay.
You talked to some physicians, and you became a little more at ease with it. So the personal statement 100% tells the story of your experiences, meaning you didn't have many clinical experiences to begin with,
Right.
which means you had nothing to write about in your personal statement.
Right.
You weren't able to draw those conclusions as to why you wanted to be a physician, assuming that was the goal of you writing the personal statement, and it still looked like you were leaning more towards why you think you're going to be a good one. But it's, with the goal of the personal statement being why do you want to be a doctor, it's super hard to answer that without having clinical experience.
Right.
Right? It's you can't lean on experiences and emotions and feelings about why you want to be a physician if you've never put yourself around patients and physicians, at least
Right.
to a certain extent to build up those experiences.
Right.
And so that lack of clinical experience and the personal statement reflecting that lack of clinical experience is in my mind 100% why you didn't get an interview. Because the admissions committee isn't sold on you really knowing you wanted to be a physician.
Right.
Starting off with the first paragraph of your personal statement saying, I failed at being a musician,
Mm-hmm.
it looks like you're just kind of floundering for something else.
Right.
And, oh, look, my partner's a doctor of psychology, so I think I should go into healthcare too. Okay? And medicine is too hard. It's too long of a journey. It's too expensive to risk an acceptance on a student like yourself who is going to come into medical school and may, in the first semester or two, go, yep, not for me, I'm out.
Right.
Right? Even though you've shown the aptitude with your postbac, you've shown that you can handle the academic side of things with your 4.0,
Mm-hmm.
but from everything else, putting yourself around doctors and patients and everything else, is this the life that you want? And you haven't proven it to, I don't think you've proven it to yourself yet. Maybe you have, but I think you need to prove it to yourself more, and that will reflect more in your experiences and in your personal statement moving forward.
Okay.
So one last thing with your application, I don't know if we do have the school list here. So you are a resident of what state?
Minnesota.
Okay. So if we look at your school list, we have Case Western, which Case Western is in Ohio, right?
Yep.
It is a public school, is it not? I forget.
Yeah.
We'll leave that one off the list. I forget if that's public or private. Columbia. So Columbia obviously is a super competitive school.
Yeah.
That's fine if you want to put it on there. And this is my thing. Like, Columbia is super competitive school, but guess what? You're kind of a unique applicant with all of your music background.
Right.
And if you could have better sold your story as to why you want to be a physician, they may have loved to talk to you because you're a very different type of applicant. And so I'm completely okay with putting Columbia on there. That's why I don't tell students to apply based on MCAT or GPA. You don't know what they're looking for. The dean of admissions may be a huge orchestra fan, right? Loves going to the symphony. And he sees your application, or she sees your application come across the desk, and they're like, oh, that's cool. Let's talk to him.
Yeah.
So I would definitely continue to apply there if you're interested.
Sure.
Mayo, private school. OHSU, public school, right?
Yeah.
Brown, private school. Arizona, public school. UCSD, public school, competitive. Colorado, public school, competitive. Minnesota, state school. USD, public school. So your school list isn't helping you at all because you're applying to almost exclusively public schools.
Right.
As an out-of-state applicant. So better, more rounded school list to really improve your chances at private schools, not public schools, where their mission typically is to train students from that state, students who are more likely to stay in that state to practice as well.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
What do you think?
I think what you've laid out is manageable.
Yeah. I mean, mostly it's just experience, just time.
Right.
Just getting more and getting better experiences to really prove that this is what you want. So
Yeah.
one of my favorite experiences is hospice. Hospice is going to put you front and center with patients.
Okay.
That may be better than just doing that emergency room volunteering that you're doing, where you're cleaning rooms and handing out blankets and stuff.
Right.
And again, next time you write that description, focus more on the actual clinical, the patient interactions, and less on I cleaned beds and turned over rooms and blah blah blah. Right.
Right. Okay.
What questions do you have?
Trying to think. You hit on a lot. So, as far as experiences,
Yeah.
do you think more, less, as far, because you get the 15, do med schools want you to fill in 15 experiences, or I don't want to put stuff in there that just for the sake of putting stuff in there?
Yeah, you don't want to fluff up your application. It's super easy to see what is fluff and what isn't.
Yeah.
I would do what you want to do.
Okay.
If you have time to do some extra stuff and that's what you're interested in doing, great, do it. I would never, I never recommend looking at an activity and going, is this going to help me with my application?
Okay.
Will this activity help me get into medical school?
Right.
Evaluate things that you want to do. You love music. Go play music at a nursing home.
Okay.
Right? That's
Yeah.
you could turn that into clinical experience where you play music for 20 or 30 minutes and then you go and interact with the patients, the residents. I had a couple students a couple years ago. They met and got married. They were PhD students in music at Indiana, and both of them played music at nursing homes and fell in love with how the music was able to affect these patients. And they fell in love with the patient side of things, and they're like, I want to go be a doctor, both of them. And then they both got into Wake Forest, I think.
Okay.
Which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So use your skills, use your talents, use your background to dictate what you want to do. Don't do something just because you think that's what you have to do.
Right. Okay. Do you have an opinion on DO versus MD?
Apply to both.
As far as because I'm non-traditional, do you think that non-traditional? Pardon?
Apply to both.
Apply to both? Okay.
Apply to both. Yeah.
All right.
Historically, DO programs have been friendlier to non-traditional students. That typically is from a grade standpoint. Your grades are fine, though. So you don't need that aspect of things.
Right.
I think your background will be attractive to both MD and DO programs. So I don't think you need to worry about that. But at the end of the day, if you want to be a physician, apply to both. It's going to increase your chances of getting in. I think your MCAT score is strong enough. I wouldn't retake it. Your GPA is obviously good enough. It looks like you're finishing out some prereqs. If you haven't already, just obviously finish those strong.
Yeah.
And then clinical experience, and then get that personal statement under control.
All right.
To really tell that story. And if you don't have my personal statement book, I'll send you a copy so that it'll help you.
Yeah, no, I bought it already. So.
All right. There we go.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
You're welcome.